all, welcome back to Hell Hath No Fury, the podcast where we research very specific things we want to and hope that you want to listen. This week we have the topic of murderer, but only one single murder. I'm Kay and this is Elle.
Thanks for that killer introduction as ever, Kay. Get yourselves comfortable for some deadly dishing on a couple of killer queens you wouldn't want to cross. If sharing these stories has taught us anything recently, it is that the idea of the fairer sex is a load of nonsense, which, to be fair, we already knew, and tonight is no exception. I've got my popcorn at the ready, Kay, so who are we spilling the tea on first tonight?
Well, tonight my story is very interesting. Have you ever heard of a woman called Jenna Devis?
I have not.
Oh, I was hoping you would say that. You probably have, but don't know you have. You might become a bit more familiar as the story goes on.
Oh, excellent.
So, in 1633, Jenna Devis was accused of murder by witchcraft, our favourite.
Yes, excellent.
She was accused of witchcraft by a 10-year-old boy, Edmund Robinson. His story went as follows. He showed up home to his family very late one evening. He was dishevelled, and his parents were furious with him for being out so late. He had a curfew and he knew it. The story he told them shook them to the core. He was in the fields when he came across two dogs, two greyhounds. He tried to get them to play with him, to chase a hare, I believe, is what he said. Do a bit of fetching, but they wouldn't. They didn't act very much like dogs at all. After a moment or two, they transformed into humans, one woman and one boy. The woman then bewitched the boy, not Edmund, the other dog.
Dog boy.
The other boy, turned him into a horse, which she then forced Edmund on and rode them to a farm. At the farm, there were dozens of witches, 60, he said. And these delicious witches, these witches made delicious food rain from the ceiling. They had pulleys and they would pull on them, and down would come all sorts of treats back then. So it'd be like butter or some sort of cake, stuff like that, stuff that young boy would really want. And then this terrified Edmund, naturally, so he ran away. He escaped from the witch's barn, and on the way home he was attacked by a boy with cloven hooves, and that's why he looked so ratchet. He was attacked, as you do.
I mean, as somebody who has a fair experience of children, that definitely sounds like the kind of thing a child would come out with when they know that they have done something wrong and they need to get out of trouble. Not understanding that it is everything completely on top of the outlandish.
All he had to say was, I was attacked. But no, it was, I went to a barn and there were 60 witches and food rained from the ceiling, and then there was a boy and he had hooves. Like,
kids are so stupid.
so stupid. So his father immediately sprang into action, took him around the communities to find the witches. He would take him to church, and Edmund would point or would identify or something like that. They spent 3 months on the road before they had enough evidence to bring to the magistrate. They'd combed the churches, and Edmund scanned the crowd and picked out as many as he could remember from the 60 in the barn. And he found 20 of them. 17 of these witches were found guilty. Jenna Devis was among those convicted by the testimony of that night, in addition to the murder of Elizabeth Nutter, which seems to have been just tacked on along the way.
As you do,
kind of, yeah. The murder, like, it was never in the boy's story, but I think it was in the father's story, if you know what I mean.
What's going on there, Daddy Dearest?
Right? Why you have a problem with the Nutters? Charles I was on the throne at this stage, and witch hunts weren't really as well tolerated as they were previous, so none of the witches were hanged. In fact, a year later, their convictions were actually overturned because Edmund told everybody that he lied and that he just didn't want to get into trouble.
Duh.
So no one was hanged, but at that stage you had to pay your way through prison at the time, and if you couldn't afford to pay to stay in prison, you just had to stay. So it was likely a lot of those people couldn't afford to get out of prison because they had racked up a debt basically to the crown.
Yeah.
So even when Edmund recanted his statement as completely fabricated, there's still evidence that Jennet was in prison for at least a year afterward before she kind of drops a little bit off the radar. There is There is possibility that she just took on an alias after she got out of prison, but we can't really confirm that. So this is the last confirmed um, evidence of Jenna Devis. Before Charles I it was on the throne, it was King James the Sixth of Scotland and the First of England. Yeah. You might remember this king from such wholesome phrases as "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live," and other happy Bible references, which he wrote, I believe. This is the King James of the King James Bible.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck is he? He wrote the Bible. That was only 400 fucking years ago.
Right? Like, on what authority did he have? You know?
Yeah, excuse me. And then to put loads of witch bullshit in there. Like, was a witch even a thing before him? Because he learned about it from the Danes, I believe. So,
I mean,
it wasn't ever in...
It's all agenda, isn't it? You know? It's like, right... You know, in all this time, here we go, religion bashing again. In all this time, you know, since Jesus was born, everyone's just added their own bit with every translation of this Bible. And he is Jimmy, who hates witches, like, if we put it in the Bible...
He wrote the fucking Bible. He wrote the Bible in current circulation. He's just a king.
Yeah, like... But kings back then, it was all divine, right? Wasn't it?
Oh yeah, fucking hand of God, shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez.
Anyway. So James was notorious for his witch hunts, and he even went as far as spreading a manual that he wrote on top of the Bible. Like, this is his second publication. He was a writer. So he went, and he spread a manual that he wrote called Demonology, with an IE instead of a Y, on witch hunting to the magistrates throughout the United Kingdom at the time, and he told them in no uncertain terms were they to find the witches. And it had been common knowledge for a long time that since an early trip to Denmark, where he began the study of witchcraft as a branch of theology, that he was really kind of into this. I know, as a branch of theology, please.
I wish everybody could see the face that I just pulled.
Yeah, I know, right? Like, come on, honestly. On the way back from one of these trips, he became convinced that witches were trying to murder him and his new bride, and his paranoia intensified. So the magistrates, knowing his bloodlust for witch hunts and witchcraft, knew it was a sure way to get into his good graces, so naturally that's what they fucking did. And this leads us back to 1612, and now this is where I think you might recognise our Jennet.
Okay. Jennet. Bring her on.
So Alison Devis was walking along a path begging. She comes across a salesman walking in the other direction and asks him for some pins. Pins were very expensive at the time. They were handmade, and it took a long time to make them. They're small and sharp. But they're also very useful in medical techniques and some love potions or some such. And Alison's grandmother was a cunning woman. A cunning woman back in that time was a healer. She was someone that you went to instead of a doctor if you couldn't afford a doctor or didn't want to be poisoned by their medical practices at the time. And they likely had a lot more fortune in actually healing people than real doctors did. Mm-hmm. They were herbal, they were wholesome, they were a lot of TLC. And doctors were like, here, have this arsenic. This might help. Where's me leeches? Do you know what I mean? Like,
where's me leeches?
Anything, you got a cold, we need to bleed you. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Yeah,
your blood is shit.
Exactly. Yeah, you just, stick a few leeches on there, suck your blood up, you be grand.
You might be fine. Worry. You might die, but like also you might not. So
but, dying's just a risk of living, isn't it? It's something that we all have to chance.
That's it. Like you've come to the best place, and over here, Alison's grandmother's like, "You want some tea? You have a cold. We'll give you some tea. Will we put some mint in it?
Mm-hmm. Chicken soup."
Yeah, right. Maybe we'll feed you. Maybe you're malnourished. Sorry. So she asked for the pins. So they're useful for medical techniques. The traveling salesman didn't pay her any attention at all. He was very rude to her. He didn't believe that she intended to buy the pins at all. He thought he was probably going to take them out and she would snag them and run away. So he didn't even undo his bag. He gave her no. He was very firm. no. And so she cursed him under her breath. As they had words, there was a bit of a tiff. Suddenly, he fell to the ground, and one side of his body was paralyzed.
Oh no.
What does that sound like to you? You can't move one side of your face.
Stroke.
Yeah,
Easy.
that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
You
Easy.
think that might have been in the medical practices at the time? You think anyone might have been like, stroke?
Yeah.
But
Of
no,
course
apparently
not. Of course not. It was a curse. Duh.
Yeah, it was a curse. So she feels fucking terrible. She's terrified. She helps him to an inn. She apologizes. She believes herself to be at fault. She confesses. She thinks she accidentally cursed him with a spell, and he forgives her. He doesn't hold her accountable at all.
I am actually very
But
surprised by that. That is not
right,
what I thought was going to happen.
yeah, he's a sound lad. Like she helps him, and she's very apologetic. Like she's like a good girl. Like, and sorry, but importantly, the man's son does not forgive her. And at the time, while the magistrates pursued witches to the letter of James's ridiculous law, they had one limitation, and that was that they couldn't accuse anybody of witchcraft. They had to wait for a member of the community to accuse someone. This was I don't know how this was so well upheld, but it was. No magistrate could accuse anyone of witchcraft. Um, but with that, the Pendle witch trials began.
Oh, damn.
Oh damn!
Oh, shit.
So from this first interaction with Alison, 4 people were imprisoned. It was her grandmother and a couple of other family members. Alison confessed. She thought that she was in the wrong here,
Oh, bless
and
her.
she was fucking devastated.
Poor girl.
So after they were arrested, they kind of started turning on each other and being like, "Yeah, I mean, this one has the mark of the devil, but like I don't,
no.
so I'm grand." So
Girls,
everyone,
you're meant to stick up for each other.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, there's a lot of that going on, but I think like it was also a tool that was used to kind of like get
Oh,
even,
definitely.
do you know what,
Divide
even
and
family
conquer,
to provide
you know?
for kind of,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of these confessions were not really confessions.
Oh.
Like they were probably on their 6th day without food, and they were like, "Yeah, you did this, didn't you?" And they're like, "Oh, I suppose so." Thanks so much. Do you know what I mean? Like it was definitely not like there was coercion.
Oh, yes. Yeah. 100%.
Right? So after this, or while those 4 people were imprisoned, another member of the family organized a meeting at Malkin Tower to kind of figure out where they were supposed to go with this, like what was going on, what they could do for their people in prison. Like it was just kind of like a fact gathering and a moving forward and plan making. Maybe they were trying to get them like a barrister or something. I don't know. But from this meeting, a further 8 people were arrested. So that's 12 people in total, and that's conveniently as much as King James's demonology sets as a coven.
Yeah.
So this magistrate was going for it. He wanted the full fucking coven. And among these people was one boy who they thought was probably had learning difficulties. Like he was saying crazy stuff that like didn't make any sense at all, but they're like, yeah, he's definitely like he was just a little bit,
That just
slow
makes
or
it so
whatever
sad, doesn't it? Like,
whatever they said back in the day.
to think of, like, what people must have gone through
Yeah.
and being accused of and stuff. Like, even up until fairly recently, to be fair. Like,
Yeah.
that is so sad.
It's so sad. Like they were just totally like thrown under the bus. So these 12 people in total now that we have, one of them was tried over the county borders because she was just visiting from close by, so she wasn't kept with the others. But the rest of them, 11, were chained to the floor in a basement until their trial began and effectively left to rot. Alison's grandmother died before the trial even started because of this mistreatment. Like they probably weren't being fed. It was unsanitary. They weren't being washed. She's no lady. Like and the worst part is because as a healer, she probably knew that she was gonna die as soon as she saw the conditions. Now, the star witness of the trial, once it eventually came to trial, there's reports of the brother I just told you about, the learning difficulties brother. Potentially, we don't have any actual diagnosis. They had to carry him into the courthouse because he was just so emaciated and so abused at that stage. He couldn't walk. He couldn't make it in. So like he's obviously going to say exactly what you want him to say.
Of course. And
This
what
he's
always
in
gets me,
no
right?
way able to put a defense up for himself.
Like, what always gets me about this whole witchcraft nonsense is if these people really were witches, wouldn't they have been able to do something about their
Anything
situation?
to get themselves out of there. Yeah, you would think so.
Hmm.
Um, Now the star witness of this trial was none other than our very own Jenna Devis. She, yeah, she gave testimony against them all. She was taken into the custody of the magistrate right after the 12 were arrested and very likely coached in this testimony against her mother, her brother, her sister, as well as the 7 other people because one had died and one was across the border. She was 9 years old. She was a child.
9.
The magistrate took her after he arrested her family and told her exactly what to say. So she comes into the court. Probably loved the bit of attention. She's only 9 years old. Do you know what I mean? Like everyone is looking at her and her story, and she's saying all these things. Her mother screamed so hard at her, screamed abuse at her during the trial that the mother had to be removed. And Jenna then told the court that her mother had a familiar named Ball, a dog, and that he used to help her with various murders and that she'd been practicing witchcraft for 3 or 4 years at that stage. Now, how does a 9-year-old know the concept of 3 or 4 years?
No, they don't. They haven't got a
Time
clue.
doesn't time
No.
doesn't mean anything to a 9-year-old really. Like they
No,
don't
not in
understand
those
the
sorts of terms. They'd say when I was
no.
little, when I was a
Yeah.
little girl, my mum used to do this, or, you know, or they wouldn't even think about it like before. And say you're 9 years old, like 3, 4 years ago, whatever. You're looking like 5, 6. Like, how strong is your memory even before that? You would probably
Yeah.
not think about it. You'd think, yeah, this is something that mum has always done.
Yeah.
They would not be that specific.
No, they couldn't be. They absolutely couldn't be. So she goes and tells the court that points out the people on the dock, and obviously the mother, the brother, the sister, and tells them that she saw them practicing witchcraft in Malkin Tower that day. And the judge, he's like, I don't know if I believe this. So he's like, well, what about? And then says a name. I can't remember the exact name. And they coached her well enough that she was like, no, I don't remember seeing her there. She would only name the people on the dock, and that's all. She they couldn't even trick her into naming, like they couldn't even trick her into like divulging her lies because she had been coached. But like you're 9 years old, your family's gone. It's been months. This man is taking care of you. He's going to tell you it's all going to be okay. If you say these things in court, everything will be fine. And meanwhile, the mother is just like, she doesn't even know what she's doing. She doesn't even know that she's sentencing us to death. Like, just watching your kid walk into a trap that's probably going to traumatize them forever. That must
Like,
be horrific.
kids don't have the concept of long-term consequences. A lot of them don't have the concept of consequences at all. They're so impulsive, aren't they? And it's, and especially if you think, I don't know, maybe if children are different now as to, obviously they were back then, but even back then you've got to think like they were simpler lives that they did lead. It was all about, just survival and looking after each other and stuff. And she's not going to be sitting there thinking, oh well, if I say this, then they're going to think this, and this will happen, and that will happen. She's going to be thinking short term, as you say, I'm being looked after right now.
Yeah.
Like they
Where's
completely
my
took
next meal
advantage of
coming
her.
from?
Exactly, that's outrageous.
Poor thing. So of these 12 people, one is already dead. One is found not guilty, and the rest are found guilty and executed by hanging, including her brother, mother, sister.
Holy shit,
Yeah. And
that is
then, isn't it
insane.
crazy that she's then accused of witchcraft by a child? And this is the only kind of testimony that is taken from children in court in James's day, in James's Britain. He will only make this amendment for witchcraft trials.
Because he knows how unreliable children's testimony
Yeah,
could be and how easily
exactly.
coached they could be. So he's not going to
Yeah,
have them up there for anything else, just what he obviously
pretty
wants.
much. And luckily for Jennet, Charles kind of overturns this and he doesn't accept their testimony. And that's kind of why it was overturned in the case of Edmund.
That's karma. That's karma.
And it's unfortunate as well because I wouldn't hold her accountable for these actions. Like,
Oh
this is
no.
a sick bastard who manipulated a child.
Yeah, like as much as I say it's karma, it's not fair to say
It's
that.
horrible
But
karma, but maybe it is. But
yeah,
like,
it's just one of those life
she,
lessons.
yeah, and it's horrible. Like, I just can't stop thinking about the mom screaming at her because she's like, I am fucked now,
Mhm.
and you don't even know what you're doing.
Oh my word. Oh, I don't even want to think
Because she's
about it.
9, she's just trying to tell a story. She's trying to act for the crowd. She's acting in a play, essentially.
Who knows what they could have told her to get her to
Anything.
say what she said? That is absolutely awful. Like, oh my word. Like, I can't even. Because then you don't know how, like, she would have thought about that after. Like, how long did it actually take her to understand what she did and the part
Yeah.
that she played? I can't imagine how that could have followed her and the guilt that she could have felt.
Yeah. How traumatic would it have been during the trial that she was accused of murder in when she wasn't even a murderer.
Yeah, she hadn't done anything.
She hadn't even
Like,
done it.
oh, that is so. All of our stories are so sad, really, aren't they?
I know,
They're
yeah.
actually really tragic. Oh, that poor little girl.
Yeah. And if Charles hadn't overturned the kind of started overturning those witch laws, the 20 people accused of being witches by Edmund would have been the biggest witch trial in Britain,
Yeah.
only after or only before the Pendle witch trial, which
Mhm.
Jennet was involved in. Both of them actually.
That's
So,
mad.
isn't it? It's
Wow.
crazy.
Like I can't. I actually. I'm surprised I've not heard of her because everybody knows about the Pendle Witch trials and the whole story. But I'm surprised that like I've obviously read about it and either our names just not actually come up or
Yeah.
I've just not absorbed it. But then
Crazy,
there's
isn't
this
it?
whole other story. Like, oh, that is mad. Almost poetic justice of her being accused of witchcraft later. But
Yeah.
again, it's that thing
Murdered by
of
witchcraft.
she can't be held accountable. She can't be held responsible for what she did. She was a child. That would never
Yeah.
stand today. Never. Not in.
Never.
Not
No.
in. I mean, it would. You would like to think
The
anyway
magistrate would
that it would
never get
never
the child.
happen. No. Well, no, certainly not. But
No.
you'd like to think that they couldn't be coerced into giving false evidence of that
Mm,
magnitude. But of course, we know that that's
not
not
the case.
guaranteed.
I've
But
also chosen not to name the magistrate as well because I feel like it's not his story.
no, it's not his story. He's
And they're named too much. They're given too much credit in all of this. And the people who are really should get the mention are the likes of Jennet and her mother Elizabeth and her sister and her brother and Alison, who are actually true victims of this society. And fucking James the first or whatever
patriarchy.
this stupid name is, he had a real fucking thing against Christianity.
Stupid name. Oh yeah, he was. Isn't he the one who Guy Fawkes tried to blow up?
Yes, he is.
Yes, I always thought it was James the First, but I never want to say that for sure.
He is.
Because he was Protestant, wasn't he? And Guy Fawkes was Catholic, and they wanted to going off on a tangent, not
Yep.
relevant. But yeah,
Son of Mary, Queen of Scots.
yeah. After Elizabeth the First died with no heir, that's it. Yep. Little history
God, we
lesson for
both
everybody.
know our Elizabethan Britain. Why do I know it?
Yeah. I mean, we only had like bonfire night like last week. We did a
Oh yeah,
yeah.
we did that on Halloween.
Yeah.
All our culture was stamped out by someone else.
It was. Wonder who that was.
Oh, who was it? No, we have plenty of culture.
That's
I'll
a part of
have you
history
know.
that I have completely forgotten.
All right, what have you got for me, Elle?
All right, okay. Coming in hot for our second terrible tale this week is the not so admirable Alice Arden. Have you ever heard of Alice Arden?
No, I don't think so, but it does sound very familiar.
As soon as I came across it, I was thinking, do I know this person? And then I realised I was thinking of Elizabeth Arden, and I was like, never mind. Definitely a very different story. Well, let me take you back to Valentine's Day, 1551. I enjoy that both of our stories this week are
Back in the day.
way back in the day. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that. So, Valentine's Day, 1551, is the night that Alice Arden and her husband Thomas should have spent making gooey eyes at each other and getting the ride, but instead ended in what? What did it end in, Kay?
Murder.
That's
Most
the
horrid.
one. Murder most foul.
Fiendish.
That's the one, of course it is. So, not really much background for us with Alice. She married her husband, Thomas Arden, probably for political reasons. They made their home at Faversham Abbey. Alice is said to have been young, tall, and well favoured of shape and countenance.
Oh, she thick.
Mm-hmm. All those things that matter in a woman, obviously.
The only thing.
Mm-hmm. The only things. So, it seems that Alice's husband didn't really do it for her, though, as she began an affair with a local tailor by the name of Mosby. Not to be confused with Ted. The pair were not discreet, as Mosby often visited the Ardens' home, flaunting their affair openly. And this continued long term. But it appears that Thomas, he just turned a blind eye to their shenanigans.
Not bothered.
I mean, perhaps he was unwilling to sever ties with his wife's family. You know, it's not like they married for love or anything. Just like,
Probably not her first time being up to some shit, really.
Yeah. So he just didn't even flacker at it. And Alice really grew to loathe her husband Thomas and decided that the easiest thing to do would just be to dispose of him, remove him from the picture, so she could carry on with her tailor, Mr. Mosby.
It wasn't stopping her.
No. That's the thing. Everybody knew about this. It really was not a secret. Like, even all the townsfolk and things knew of her conduct. And, you would stay over there all the time. She was getting the ride on the reg. But she decided, I need to kill my husband. I hate him. I'm sick of him. I just want to be with Mosby. I'm going to kill him. Whatever. Okay, girl, you do you. She tried for 2 years. It took 2 years of attempts before Alice was successful in her plot to kill her husband. Not the brightest bulb. One such attempt involved trying to poison him. She mixed milk and poison together whilst making his breakfast, but she didn't consider the noticeable taste of the poison. So Thomas only took a couple of spoonfuls before declaring it inedible due to its quality because it tasted like shite. So he was like, fuck you, wife, this is horrible. I'm not eating it. And she was like, damn it, that was poison. Eat your poison.
She's a thick.
Thick. In more ways
She's
than
not
one.
the only kind of thick.
So this geared Alice towards recruiting accomplices. Why can't I
again?
speak tonight?
Recruiting a Macumicus. What did you just say?
Recruiting accomplices.
Yes, I see that now.
Indeed. So the accomplices were namely John Green. He was another tailor who had his own grievances against Thomas Arden due to a land dispute. Thomas had claimed the land as part of his property, and Green was pretty pissed about it, which is fair. We have another chap by the name of George Bradshaw. He was a goldsmith whom Green asked to join him in travelling to London when they were supposed to be going after Thomas one time because he didn't want to go alone. Fair. And then a chap by the name of Black Will. So Black Will was a war veteran, as was George Bradshaw, and they were acquaintances. So Green and Bradshaw just happened upon Black Will on their travels, and they were all introduced, and Black Will already had several crimes under his belt that he had committed in France, namely robbery and murder. So when they chanced upon him, he was already armed with a sword and buckler, making a living as a highwayman. So they thought, you know what, you'd be a pretty good mercenary. Do you want a job? So he was employed due to his experience in such matters of murder, and was to be paid £10 upon successful completion of the murder. So we've got this little band of followers. But again, several failed attempts on Thomas Arden's life. One such attempt was on the ground of St Paul's Cathedral whilst they were in London, and another on the return journey. But these attempts failed as the servant accompanying Thomas was loyal. So Blackwell had tried to threaten him, tried to think we can use the servant to get to Thomas, and the servant was like, nah, I don't think so. I read that he bolted the doors of their lodgings that evening so nobody else could get in. And I just thought that was pretty mad, because imagine not locking your door in the 1500s.
Yeah, but like back then, like back even in the 70s, people weren't locking their doors.
I know, but like when you talk about, the 60s and the 70s and parents are always like, we didn't lock our doors. I get it. But when you think back to like the 1500s,
Yeah.
it's the law and enforcing of it and people running about with swords and pistols. It just seems like a good idea to lock your door.
That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like a bolt was like extra.
Perhaps, yeah, like a deadbolt. That
Yeah.
would make sense. But yeah, so anyway, servant was like, yeah, you guys aren't getting in. And then on the for the return journey, this servant pretended that his horse was lame, thinking he would be able to prevent them from going back because he knew that they were going to be ambushed. But Thomas was like, be grand, and actually had several acquaintances of his accompany them on their journey home, which made ambush impossible. So far, all the attempts on Thomas's life were not going too well. If that were me, I'd be thinking, you know what? Maybe the universe just wants this guy to live. Maybe I'm just not supposed to be successful in murdering this guy. But
Yeah.
Alice, nah, yeah, he had to die. He had to die. She hated his guts. She wanted him dead. So the fateful Valentine's murder was hatched, as it was deemed easier to murder Thomas Arden in his own house as opposed to on the road or in the open. So services of others were then procured as well. So we have Cicely Pounder, who was Moresby's sister, and two of Arden's servants who weren't as loyal as the one who had gone down to London with him, which is very sad. Michael Sanderson and Elizabeth Stafford. So the plan was, Black Will was to hide in a closet in the parlour, and whilst Thomas and Moresby played some sort of game, said to be backgammon, can't say for sure, I don't really care.
Thomas and Mosby.
Oh yeah,
They're like
yeah.
pals.
Moresby used to go around the house all the time, they like hung out. Like, it was a thing. And then he'd go bang his wife. And Thomas was like, I don't care. Yeah, I know, crazy. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right.
So they're playing this game, and Green is sort of overseeing it, and Green is to give a signal, at which point Black Will is to sneak out of his hiding place. All of this went perfectly to plan. Black Will jumped out, he threw a napkin over Thomas's head and face, at which point Moresby struck him in the head with a pressing iron, said to be £14, if you really want to know the specifics, and then produced a dagger and cut his throat. Alice then joined the fray and stabbed her husband 8 times to be thoroughly sure that he would succumb to his wounds. Lovely evening at the Arden household.
Excessive.
Right. Like, he's already been hit on the head with a £14 pressing iron. He's already had his throat slit, and then wifey comes in and stabs him 8 times to be sure that
I
he is
noticed she came in last. Like, she didn't want any hand in this.
Oh no.
At all.
Oh no, she just figured that the men are going to be able to sort of get in this first, leave it up to them, and then I can finish the job. She wanted
dirty.
Yeah, she wanted to make sure let the men, they've got the strength, they've got the speed, they can be super sneaky and attack him, and then I can come in and I can finish him off. Like, dare you go one-on-one, girl. Dare ya. So Thomas's body was then transferred to some land just beyond their property. Cicely Pounder helped carry him out. This is Moresby's sister, Alice's future sister-in-law, I suppose you could say. The blood was cleaned up from within the parlour, the rushes rearranged, and the dagger and napkin disposed of. So whilst all this was going on, it said that Alice had ensured that servants who were not in on the plot to kill their master were sent about tasks outside of the residence. Then after the murder, they returned to the home, and another pair showed up as well. There were a pair from London by the name of Prune and Cole who had been invited for a dinner party, which had been planned all along. They'd been invited to supper, and when they all arrived, the servants and the dinner guests, Alice began openly questioning her husband's absence, constantly reminding everyone within the household that he wasn't there, and it was unusual, as if he'd gone out and not returned. So the dinner party went ahead, the group dancing and playing music, thinking their neighbours would assume that Thomas was still entertaining guests. Having dressed him in his night clothes, they believed that this would account for the hour of his death, thereby giving them an alibi. All coinciding with the plan to make it appear that Thomas was, he'd been out for a walk in the middle of the night, as you do, and been murdered on his way home, with them having placed his
In your
body.
jammies?
Yeah, in your jammies, yeah.
So he went out for a walk in his jammies in the middle of the night?
Yeah, so their plan was, right, we had a dinner party, all went well, we danced and sang and whatnot, we were merry well into the wee hours. Thomas decided to go for a walk in his night clothes, and he didn't come back. Oh, goodness me, he was murdered on his way home.
But there's witnesses to him not being at the dinner party.
Yeah, he went out before the dinner. I don't know, I get very confused.
Sorry, before the dinner party.
Yeah,
okay,
before the
I'm
dinner
with you.
party. My apologies, yeah.
In his night clothes before
party.
the dinner party. Why is he in his jammies before dinner?
I know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's stupid.
Is he not feeling well or something? Who the fuck? Alright, go on anyway. They were stupid. They were stupid.
Absolute dumbasses, honestly. Like, they thought they had planned this perfectly. They were like, seriously, this couldn't go wrong. We sent the servants away, they've come back, we've got these guests. We're like, oh no, where is Thomas? Where on earth could he be? Whatever. So, the next morning, there are two versions of events here. Version 1, the next morning, Alice alerted the town that her husband was missing and a search began, resulting in the discovery of his body. However, suspicion was aroused as a few rushes were noticed at the scene, indicating that he had in fact been inside the property very shortly before or at the time of his death. And Alice's conduct alone was enough to suspect her due to her affair.
I see Alice's conduct, but the rushes I don't understand because he lives in the home. So, naturally, it would be normal for him to be in the house before he died.
Right, but then why was his body outside? It was one of those things of like, okay, so if he's been in the house, he's gone for this walk, he's heading home, and yet he's still, how are the rushes by his body, sort of thing. Surely, even if he had, some of the rushes, apparently there was one, wedged between, his foot and his slipper. If you're walking along, surely you're going to be like, oh, what's this in me shoe? And, pick it out kind of thing,
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. So, the house was searched. Blood and hair was found, which had not been cleaned up properly, as well as the napkin and the dagger, which had not been very well discarded.
What?
Yeah.
Why are you keeping it in the house, girl? Get rid of it.
Honestly, dumb as anything, these people.
Yeah, one job.
Pure, Dunning-Kruger right here. Absolute morons. That's version 1. Version number 2 is that Alice actually made a grand show of worry for her husband all night long. She sent servants to search for him well into the night, lamenting sorely at his absence until the town-wide search began upon notification of the mayor, and the body was found. However, Alice's innocence was again immediately cast into doubt due to fresh snow lying upon the ground. Thomas, only being dressed in his nightgown, seemed odd at this point, as it appeared unlikely he would have gone for an evening stroll so scantily dressed when it's snowing out. And in addition, fresh footprints. No. I can't even. Fresh footprints were preserved, making it clear that the body had been transported from the house to which people had returned. So, I mean, version number 2 seems a little bit cut and dry to me, to be honest. This comes from the Newgate calendar, which I'm not familiar enough with to determine the accuracy thereof in
Yeah.
terms of how biased it may be. Seems a little bit cut and dry. Like, it's snowing outside. There are going to be footprints. Like, I don't know. But regardless of the events that led to the discovery of the body, suspicion still fell upon Alice. Sorry, I'm just going to take a moment to note the amount of times that I have written alive instead of Alice and not realised. Oh, I'm so dumb. So yeah, she was strictly examined by the mayor. So, you know, her conduct being examined by the mayor alongside the blood and the murder weapon being found led to her confession and identification of her co-conspirators who were arrested.
So she gave them up
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
immediately.
yeah, immediately.
Immediately.
Yeah, she wasn't going down alone, hell no.
Fuck's
And
sake.
she did not get off lightly for her crime. So,
Good.
one of the things that drew me to tell this tale today, aside from the fact that it was mental, you know, this wife having an open affair, the husband kind of shrugging it off, so many associates, just the pure idiocy of these people, was the
Snow.
sentence that Alice received.
Oh, please. Okay.
So, burning at the stake is often wildly assumed to be far more common practice than it actually was, but
Yeah.
that is the fate that awaited Alice Arden for her wicked crime.
Alice was burned at the stake in England.
Yes. In
Wow.
Canterbury, to be precise.
That's funny because not a lot of burn-ins were done in England. They were
No.
mostly done in Scotland, where, for example, witch hunts, like James's witch hunt punishments got a lot more traction up there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, you know, whenever people think of witch trials and things, they always think of burning at the stake, and in England it was so rare. So when I
Yeah.
read this, I was shocked. I
Yeah.
was shooketh. I couldn't believe it.
Also, nowhere it's rare. In fact, non-existent.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Salem.
the words the crime, that's the thing, that she was actually charged with was not murder. She was charged for petty treason, which, you know, was basically murdering her husband. You know,
How
it
is
was
that
her
treason?
husband. It wasn't because she murdered someone. It was murdered her husband. As far as I've understood it anyway, it was that she murdered her husband. It wasn't... It was murder, but it wasn't just murder, it was murdering her husband. At least that's what I've read. Please feel free,
Okay.
anybody who is listening, to correct me if I am wrong. But yeah, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I do not have a date, Alice set out on foot, dressed in a black gown. She knelt and prayed before her pyre for a few minutes before removing her shoes, black gown and petticoat. Dressed only in a simple black sleeveless shift, she allowed herself to be led to the stake, to which she was chained at the wrist, thighs, knees, ankles, and chest to hold her firmly against the stake. After being chained, the stool on which she was stood was removed, leaving her bound to the stake about 3 feet from the ground. Sometimes in those days, strangulation during burning was common, but was not the fate that awaited Alice. She was left to suffer through the full horror of her punishment. So the wood was lit, and although at first she did remain calm, by the time the fire rose up to her feet, she began shrieking and crying out, struggling against her bonds. Small amounts of wood were further added to the pyre to keep the fire burning, and the ordeal was over by 3 o'clock. Some reports claiming she survived a whole hour of her torturous sentence before she actually died, her pitiful corpse then hungrily devoured by the flames.
Fuck.
Yeah. Like, I couldn't imagine. And that is her punishment for conspiring to and murdering her husband. All the other conspirators were, of course, executed. Some were hanged. One of them, I believe it might have been Green or Mosby, hung, drawn, and quartered, which is not pleasant. But I definitely think that Alice...
Favourable to being burned alive.
Exactly. Yeah. Alice definitely had it the worst. And I am honestly so shocked that she was burnt at the stake. Absolutely shocked.
And they didn't even give her the mercy of snapping her neck first.
Nope.
That's horrific. That is horrendous.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that she apparently took an hour for her to die.
Well, yeah. See, if that was me, I would be inhaling all of the smoke I could.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
I would be sniffing those flames.
Snorting them right up there. Yeah.
Fuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's horrendous. And she was charged with petty treason.
Yeah. I am actually going to look this up right now just to be sure if I have explained it correctly. Cause I don't
Yeah, what does that mean?
So, according to Wikipedia, petty treason was an offence under the common law of England in which a person killed or otherwise violated the authority of a social superior other than the king. So a social superior being her husband. So,
and because of his status, or because he was her husband?
I'm not entirely sure, because there wasn't an awful lot really said about their status, either of them, other than she was well born. So yeah, it never existed in Scotland, but it was abolished. Really? So in England and Wales, petty treason ceased to be a distinct offence from murder by virtue of the Offences Against the Person Act 1828. It was abolished in Ireland in 1829.
Jesus.
Like, damn, that's pretty late on, really. But
yeah. Well, I'm not saying she was like a good person or anything, and like his death was, it seems very much a tragedy, because he was letting her live. He was letting her do whatever the fuck she wanted, and she still retained her social status.
Right.
He didn't give a shit. He didn't give a fuck. And then...
Mm-hmm. I think it must have been that he married up, perhaps. It must have been arranged, as far as I'm concerned, for political reasons. Perhaps it's one of these things where he wanted to be in with her family more than they needed to be in with him. I don't know, because it's not likely. Obviously, you want to marry your daughter off to the best possible, but it could have been one of these things where his finances or whatever weren't...
prospects were maybe alright. Like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, who's to say? But yeah, like, she could just crack on and do her thing, and yet she had him so horribly murdered.
And she brought so many people into it, and she tried so many times.
Yeah, like, she tried for 2 whole years. Like, girl, I'm sorry, just leave.
Just leave.
Just leave. You've got your tailor. He's quite happy with you.
Run away with Mosby.
He worked for some lord or other. He was doing well for himself. Just leave. You don't have to kill him. They had a daughter as well, actually. And I believe she was involved.
What?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot said. Let me just double check my notes. And I'm sure she was arrested. I'm sure she was involved. Her co-conspirators were all rounded up and executed by various means at different places and times. Let's see. We've got, so the maid, she was burnt at the stake as well. Mosby, his sister, were hanged. George Bradshaw. Now I am just going to touch on George Bradshaw for a moment as well. The goldsmith who was the acquaintance of Black Will. He actually played no further part. He was just, this is Black Will and blah blah, and he was hired. George Bradshaw played no further part, and I'm sure it was Green who protested, saying, George Bradshaw is innocent. We all may be guilty, but he is innocent. He actually had no involvement in the actual murder itself. He just introduced us to Black Will. But apparently they saw the introduction of Black Will as being fitting enough to find Bradshaw guilty, and he was hanged in chains at Canterbury. Which is tragic, which is awful.
Yeah,
Like, if
he didn't know.
literally just introduced them, you can't say he's guilty. Yeah, John Green, he was hanged as well. Yeah, so before he died, Green attempted to clear the name of Bradshaw, proclaiming the innocence of the long-dead goldsmith, because Bradshaw was executed first. No, I don't actually have anything in here about the daughter, but the daughter was arrested. So
it doesn't look well.
Doesn't look well. I mean, how tragic's that? You know?
Now, if the daughter also didn't like the dad, he must have been up to some shit as well.
I mean,
Do you know?
so that's the thing. It's two-sided though, isn't it? 'Cause it's either was he this dreadful, awful man, or was it one of these things of where men weren't wholly involved in the daughter's lives at those times, and was it not whispers of ma'am in her ear her whole life? You know? It's hard to say. But
That is a tough one.
it's crazy though. Like,
Wow.
absolutely insane.
She just went off. For 2 years, actually.
Yeah, the amount of people that she got involved, like
if nothing else, that's however many 7 people who know you want your husband dead. So suddenly he turns up dead, and you don't think anyone's gonna be like,
like, oh yeah, did you hear about that wifey who lives up the road? You know, the one who's having the affair with the tailor? Yeah, so husband, he's been murdered. Well, it couldn't have been her. She couldn't have had anything to do with it.
Couldn't possibly have been. She did ask me to murder him one time, but couldn't be her. Like, no.
Wait, a guy who... That other tailor, the guy you'd had the disagreement with over the land, he was at that dinner party that night as well. He won't fancy that. What are the chances, you know? Like...
Fucking hell.
Dumbasses.
Idiot. She was not a bright spark.
No, most certainly not. Most certainly not.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like, I feel like it had a good ending, you know?
It did have a good ending. It had a great ending.
Yeah, I was quite pleased with it. Just burning at the stake. I never thought I'd come across a burning at the stake. Never.
No.
No.
Not in England.
It's most certainly not. But there we have it.
So let's have a look at our... We're nearly coming to the end of our list.
We are, and I'm quite sad about it.
So we have 3 left. They are serial murderer, zombie, and werewolf.
Oh.
Now these are 3. Well, serial murder is fine. A zombie and werewolf are a bit like off the chain. So I will accept liberal applications of zombie and werewolf.
Oh yeah, there'll definitely be some
just some sort of cryptid will do for a werewolf and a zombie, I guess. Bath salts, probably.
Oh yeah, bath salts is straight where my mind went. So yeah, that'd be grand.
Cool. So if you say a number between 1 and 3, I'm going to assign them randomly.
Oh, okay. I'm going to say 3.
Wait. I haven't
Okay.
wait.
I apologise. I take it back. I said nothing.
Okay. 1, 2, or 3.
1.
Werewolf. Oh, this is going to be a horrendous week. What was I thinking?
No, werewolf. We definitely got a bit overexcited with these categories.
For sure. I will accept cryptid instead of werewolf.
Yeah. I'll see what I find. I mean, you never know, really, what you might find.
Okay, cryptid it is. Cryptids will be easy. There's loads of folklore about cryptids and stuff like that.
100%. They'll be absolutely all sorts.
Lovely. Well, thank you for listening. Thanks for joining us again this week for what I think was probably one of the best stories that we've told. That was an incredible story.
I thoroughly enjoyed this evening. I also feel like it is nice because, you know, we've done our sort of vampires and stuff and the ghosts. It's nice to really just bring it back to earth with
like
some
actual reality.
Yeah, crazy bitches. So, I mean, mine was the crazy bitch. Yours was a bit sad. But
yeah. I feel like we could do a whole series just on witches.
Oh, definitely. There's
easily
so much material on witches. So much.
Maybe we'll do that.
We could stay watch this space.
Season 2.
Yeah, season 2 coming at you after season 1, which we haven't finished yet.
Yeah. Once again, thank you to our wonderful producer, Anya, at Anya Byrne Communications. Hit her up if you want a podcast. And follow us on Instagram at Hell Hath No Fury Pod and Twitter at Pod Hell Hath. If you want, send us a message. We'll be there. Probably Elle on Instagram and me on Twitter. If you've got any suggestions, anything that you want to see or hear, let us know.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to get to see anything. But you know, we can talk. We can clearly talk. So if you want to hear something, just let us know. Any
Look no further.
suggestions? Any bad bitches out there who you think are worth a mention? Just hit us up. Drop us a DM. We're about.
We are. All right. Well, have a good week, guys.
Yeah, stay safe. Be happy, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.